Before we begin, imagine this: a homeless veteran, hunched on courthouse steps, clutching a photo of a daughter long gone. He's not begging for food, not asking for change, just whispering to a ghost no one else sees. But today, the world finally looks his way. This isn't just a story about law and order, it's about memory, dignity, and the quiet strength we forget to notice. And if stories like this move you real, raw, human, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We tell these stories because they deserve to be heard. It was a Tuesday morning, almost 10 o'clock, when the doorbell of Galloway's Bakery gave its signature chime, a cheerful, antique jingle that usually meant a fresh batch of scones or someone picking up a birthday cake. But that morning, it sounded different. A man had walked in, slow and careful, as if every step needed permission from the floor. He wore a faded army green jacket that had seen too many winters and one too many decades. The fabric was threadbare at the elbows, and the zipper had long given up trying to stay shut. A thick gray beard covered half his face, and under the beard, a pair of eyes, blue, tired, searching. In his left hand, he held a crumpled photograph. It was a child no more than 6, in a pink princess dress, holding what looked like a blueberry muffin with both hands. The child had dimples so deep, they looked like the thumbprints of joy itself. He didn't go to the counter. He didn't ask for money or handouts. He just stood there for a moment, taking in the warm air that smelled of sugar and cinnamon and yeast. His coat was damp from the morning drizzle, and his boots worn thin at the soles left faint, muddy impressions on the polished tile floor. The bakery was nearly full. A woman in a beige trench coat sat by the window, scrolling her phone while sipping a non-fat latte. A man in a suit and Bluetooth headset was halfway through an argument about quarterly returns. A teenager with AirPods bobbed her head to some silent rhythm, barely noticing the world. But then they noticed him, and the room changed. The warmth went cold. The chatter thinned. The looks began, first curious, then skeptical, then judgmental. Behind the counter, a young woman with a name tag that read Jessica blinked twice. Her smile faltered. She had been taught to always be polite, but the training manual didn't cover what to do when someone walked in looking like he might ask for change instead of change back. The man cleared his throat, a gravelly sound that made Jessica step back an inch, almost reflexively. "Excuse me," he said, voice low, almost apologetic. He held up the photo like it was an ID. "She used to love the muffins here, blueberry. Today's her birthday. Would you happen to have?" Jessica opened her mouth, then closed it. The manager, a thick-necked man named Brad who had been watching from the corner, stepped in. "Sir, we can't have loitering in here," Brad said, with a firm but flat tone. "If you need assistance, there's a shelter 2 blocks down." The man looked confused. He wasn't asking for assistance. He wasn't asking for anything. "I'm not loitering," he said. He looked down at the photo. "I just wanted to get her something. Something she liked, for her birthday." "Sir," Brad repeated, now stepping closer, arms folded. "This is a business. You can't come in here like this and make people uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. That word hung in the air like a bad smell. The woman in the trench coat whispered something to herself and looked away. The businessman muttered, "Jesus," under his breath. The teenager just kept staring. Outside, a delivery truck, HONKED. The man looked around the room, seeing every face turn away. He let his arm fall, the photograph now hanging by his side. "Like a flag at half-mast, I served," he said quietly. 20 years, Army medic. This jacket, it's not fashion. It's history." Nobody answered. His eyes moved to the display case, to the muffins lined in neat little rows like soldiers. He nodded toward one. "Just one. Blueberry. For her. I'll be gone after that." Brad didn't flinch. "I need you to leave, now." Then he reached for the man's arm, But before he could touch him, a voice cut through the tension. Wait. It was soft but firm. Everyone turned. The voice belonged to a boy. No older than 10. He had been sitting near the pastry counter with his mother, a woman in a nurse's uniform who looked just as surprised as everyone else. The boy got up, walked over. Look at the photograph. She looks nice, the boy said. Did she like the blueberry ones with the crumble on top or the plain kind? The man blinked. Crumble, he whispered. Then she had good taste. The boy smiled, then turned to Brad. Can I buy him one? With my own money? Brad didn't know what to say. And for a moment, the whole world paused. The bakery smelled sweet again. The light felt warmer. The room breathed. Jessica reached into the case and pulled out the best blueberry muffin she had. She wrapped it gently and handed it to the man. No charge. The man looked at the boy, then at Jessica, then at the muffin. He held it like it was breakable. Thank you, he said. Not just to them, to the room, to the silence, to the memory. And then he turned and left. The doorbell jingled again. But this time, it didn't sound so sad. Outside, he found a bench under a tree that had lost most of its leaves. The breeze carried the scent of cinnamon and distant city smoke. He sat there, carefully opened the bag, and took out the muffin. He didn't eat it right away. He stared at it, the crumble top slightly cracked, the blueberries bleeding into the golden brown crust. He reached into his coat and pulled out a worn plastic fork. Then, from a small tin box in his pocket, he pulled out a candle. He stuck the candle into the muffin and lit it with a battered Zippo lighter. The flame flickered in the wind. And then he sang, "Happy birthday to you." His voice was thin, but steady, cracked but full. The song carried just far enough for a jogger to slow down as she passed. She didn't stop, but she listened. For a moment. "Happy birthday, dear Maggie." He finished the song and blew out the candle. Then, with both hands, he broke the muffin in half and placed one half gently on the bench beside him. "For you, baby girl." The pigeons came, but he gently waved them off. "Not hers," he told them. "Not yet." He ate the other half slowly, chewing each bite as if it were the only thing he'd eaten that week. Maybe it was. A small girl in a red coat passed by. With her mother. She tugged on her mom's hand and whispered, "Is that Santa?" The mother laughed nervously. "No, sweetheart. Just a man." But the girl looked back twice. "And the man?" He smiled a little at the sound. Not because it was funny, but because it reminded him that Maggie used to call him Santa too. Even in July. He stayed there until the candle melted down into the muffin and the sky started turning silver with clouds. Then he stood, picked up the muffin half still on the bench, and crumbled it into small bits. He fed it to the pigeons anyway, because Maggie had always liked feeding the birds, and because he had no more birthdays left to give. The door to the bakery clanged shut behind him, a sound sharp enough to turn heads. But no one followed him out. The old man stood for a long moment on the sidewalk, the photograph still clutched in one wrinkled hand, flapping slightly in the breeze. His shoulders hunched as though the weight of the world had found its home there, and for a second, he looked like he might disappear altogether, fold into himself, and vanish beneath the falling snow. Inside, a heavy silence settled. It was the kind that wasn't loud but still said too much. Jenny, the young barista, kept wiping down an already clean counter, her eyes glancing toward the door every few seconds. Her lips were pressed tight, as though they too were ashamed. Woman in a red coat whispered to her friend. That was disturbing. Her friend, with high cheekbones and diamond earrings, nodded. Honestly, they should call someone. We shouldn't have to see that during brunch. Did you see his hands? Like leather. And those boots falling apart. Another man, balding and in a crisp navy peacoat, huffed. That he's pretending. These people, they act broken so they can beg. It's manipulation, pure and simple. Someone laughed uncomfortably. This city, man. One day you're sipping lattes, the next you're getting hustled by Santa Claus on meth. The bakery manager, Rob, thick-necked, button-down shirt stretching across his chest, grunted, "We got standards. I don't care what sob story he's selling. You don't come in here smelling like a dumpster, scaring off the real customers." Jenny opened her mouth, then closed it. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for another rag. The manager's words sat on the countertop like grease that wouldn't wipe off. And in the corner, at the very last table, sat Theo. The boy was quiet, his legs swinging gently off the bench, eyes never leaving the window. His hot chocolate had gone cold, tiny marshmallows sinking into brown murk, forgotten. His mom, Madison, was too busy on a video call, earbuds in, laughing with someone on the other end. Theo tapped her wrist once, twice. "Mom, that man." "Why? Did they yell at him?" She glanced up, annoyed. "Because he was bothering people." "Don't worry about it, honey. He just wanted to show a picture." "What?" she sighed, pulling one earbud out. "Look, he's just not someone we talk to, okay? He could be dangerous. You don't know where people like that have been." Theo looked down. He looked sad. His mom's attention was already back on the screen. "Finish your cocoa." But Theo wasn't done watching. He saw the man across the street now, huddled by the wall, gently brushing snow off the photo as though it were alive. Something about it made Theo's chest ache in a way he didn't have words for yet. He stood up, quietly, carefully, walked toward the trash bin by the door, and peered in. Near the top, wrapped in a bakery napkin, was half a banana nut muffin. Someone had tossed it away without a second thought, probably because it was too soft in the center. Theo reached in, unwrapped it, and carried it to the counter. Jenny noticed. "Hey kiddo, you okay?" Theo held up the muffin like an offering. "Is it okay if I give this to him?" Jenny blinked. Her throat caught. Yeah, I think that'd be okay." Rob, overhearing, muttered, "Don't encourage it." But Jenny ignored him. Theo turned and walked through the door. The wind hit him immediately, but he didn't shiver. He crossed the street. With purpose, muffin in hand, snow crunching beneath his two big sneakers, the old man looked up as the boy approached. His eyes were pale, misted over not just from age, but from years of being unseen. Theo stood in front of him, holding out the napkin. "I found this. You can have it if you want." The old man stared, then slowly reached out a shaking hand. He didn't take the food right away. He looked at the boy's face, searching. "Why?" he whispered. Theo shrugged. "Because you're hungry, and you didn't do anything wrong." The old man smiled barely. It was the kind of smile that remembered what kindness used to feel like. "Thank you," he said softly. Across the street, behind the bakery glass, the same people who had turned their backs began to glance again. But now their eyes avoided the boy. Now their silence wasn't smug, was uneasy. And inside, Jenny placed a fresh croissant in a small paper bag. She stared at it for a second before scribbling something on it with a marker. "For you." Then she slid it quietly into Theo's seat. Before Rob could see, something had shifted. Not a revolution. Not yet. But the first small ripple in still cold water. Out on the curb, the old man took a bite. Tears crept down the creases of his cheeks, unnoticed by all but one small boy who sat beside him, now not speaking, just sharing the silence. And the snow kept falling. The snow didn't stop. It came in slow spirals like ash from a fire that never quite went out. Across the street from the warm bakery, where people now laughed again and sipped lattes as if nothing had happened, the old man sat on the cold curb, holding the muffin with both hands. It had already begun to harden in the chill. But he didn't eat it. Not yet. He stared at the photograph, thumbed the edges like it was fragile glass. It showed a young girl, maybe 7 years old, with wild curls and a smile so wide it looked like summer. Her front tooth was missing. One of those grins that made you believe the world could still be good. Her name was June, he said aloud. Though no one was listening, like the month. Theo had remained by his side, unsure of what to say next. The boy crouched beside the man, drawing patterns in the slush with a stick. Is she your granddaughter? Theo asked softly. The old man chuckled. It wasn't a happy sound, it creaked like rusted hinges. No, she was my daughter, Theo blinked. Where is she now? The man looked up at the clouds. Gone, a long time now. I lost her and everything else not long after. Theo didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The boy understood. Something few adults did. Sometimes silence was the kindest companion. Her mama passed first. The man continued, voice soft. Breast cancer. We didn't catch it early. Didn't have insurance. One moment we were planning her birthday party, and the next she was gone. He rubbed his forehead. After that, it was just me and June. She was my light. My whole damn reason to breathe. He finally bit into the muffin. It crumbled like sand in his mouth. And then, one night she didn't wake up. A bad reaction to the flu. Doctor said it was rare. Said I shouldn't blame myself. His voice dropped to a whisper. But I do. Theo looked at the photograph. She looks like she laughed a lot. The old man smiled, tears brimming. She did. Always dancing too. She used to stand on my boots and make me waltz with her in the kitchen. We didn't have much, but Lord, we had music. A breeze kicked up, sending flakes swirling. Theo instinctively stood and took off his hoodie. You can wear this. My mom won't mind. The man waved it away gently. No, son, you keep it. I've been through worse than a little snow. He looked out toward the street. I served in the Gulf War, you know. 91, spent 8 months sleeping in sandstorms and dodging mortar. Theo's eyes widened. You were a soldier? Was, used to train dogs too, canine unit. My partner was a German shepherd named Buckshot. He chuckled again, this time with a little warmth. Smartest damn animal I ever met. Where's Buckshot now? Gone too, old age. They said I could keep him when I retired. He lived 5 more years. Wouldn't leave my side. The man patted his pocket. Still carry a piece of his collar. For luck. Theo's voice trembled. Why are you out here then? Didn't the army help you? The man shrugged. They tried. But after June died, I broke down. Couldn't hold a job. Started drinking, missed appointments, missed rent. Friends stopped calling. One day I woke up, and there wasn't a door to open anymore. For a moment, Theo didn't speak. He just stood there, taking it all in, this man with the snow-covered beard and war behind his eyes. Across the street, someone else had been watching. Jenny, the barista. She hadn't stopped thinking about him since the door closed. Something about his eyes had unsettled her. They weren't threatening. They weren't angry. They were tired. Soul-tired. She tucked her apron away and told the manager she was going on break. He grunted but didn't care. She crossed the street with a fresh cinnamon roll in a to-go bag and a paper cup of hot coffee. The moment the old man saw her, he looked ready to shrink away, but Theo stood firm. She's okay, Theo said. She was the only one who looked sad when you got kicked out. Jenny knelt down beside him. I should have said something, she murmured. I'm sorry. The old man looked at the coffee, then at her face. You're the first to apologize. I used to think people on the street chose that life, she said quietly. But then my uncle. He lost his job during COVID, couldn't find another one. He had a stroke last year, ended up in a shelter. He's not lazy. He's just lost. The old man nodded slowly. Yeah, that's the word. Jenny handed him the coffee. This one's on me. He took it. His hands shook a little. "Thank you." And for the first time in what felt like a century, warmth returned to his fingers. And maybe, just maybe, a little to his heart. As the hours passed, the once static image of a beggar in the bakery had become something else entirely. Not everyone noticed, not everyone cared, but the few who did, they saw it. Jenny, still rattled by the image on the phone, couldn't get the man's face out of her head. After her shift ended, she found herself walking out into the cool dusk, where the old man still sat near the entrance, just beyond the shadows, the leash wrapped around his weathered wrist. Buckshot curled quietly against his side. "Sir," she said softly. He didn't look up at first, but Buckshot lifted his head. One eye cloudy with age, one paw twitching slightly in his sleep. Jenny crouched down. "I wanted to say I saw the photo. The one you showed in the bakery. That little girl. Was she yours?" The man turned his head slowly. His voice, when it came, wasn't sharp or gruff like it had been earlier. It was low, steady, painfully calm. "Yes, Emily, my daughter." Jenny nodded slowly. She looked beautiful. She was. He paused, and kind, fierce, like her mother. For a moment, he just sat in that stillness. Jenny didn't press him. But the silence cracked something open. "We used to come here every Sunday morning," he said. "Me, her, and my wife. This was Emily's favorite spot. Cinnamon buns, she called them, swirls of joy." Jenny tried to smile, but it faltered. What happened to her? There was a long silence. He took a breath that seemed to come from the bottom of a trench. "Car accident. 3 years ago. A drunk driver. Ran a red light, hit them both. My wife died instantly. Emily held on for a few days. I was overseas. Military contract. Got the call. Too late." He looked up then, for the first time fully. His eyes were tired, but behind them was a storm Jenny wasn't ready for. "I held her hand while the machines kept her alive. I wasn't there when it mattered. That's the only photo I have left. My unit found it in the wreckage. They mailed it to me in an envelope with a folded flag." Jenny swallowed a lump in her throat. "I'm sorry. I can't imagine." "I can't forget," he whispered. They sat in silence. Then he added, more to the wind than to her, "I wasn't always like this. I had a uniform. I had purpose. Then they gave me a handshake and a brochure when I got back. 'Good luck,' they said. 'Thank you for your service.' But I couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop shaking. I had dreams that chased me into alleyways." His hand reached down to Buckshot. "This dog. He's the only reason I'm still breathing. Military K9. We retired together." Jenny felt something shift in her chest. "What's his name?" "Buckshot. May I?" He nodded. Buckshot gave a quiet woof as she extended her hand and patted his head. "Soft fur, scars beneath it. I didn't mean to be rude earlier," she said. I saw a man talking to himself and a dog in a bakery, and he didn't look offended. He just nodded. It's what they all see." Jenny looked around. The bakery lights glowed behind them. Inside, a young woman laughed with her boyfriend over scones. Someone took a selfie. "I think it's wrong, the way they looked at you," he shrugged. "It's just the way it is. No, it's not how it has to be." She stood up. "Will you be here tomorrow?" "I've got nowhere else to be." "I'll bring you coffee. And a cinnamon swirl. For Emily." He didn't say thank you. Just nodded. But she saw it. In the small lift of his lips. In the way Buckshot's tail gave a slow wag. Jenny walked away, but not before she glanced back. One last time. And saw the old man raise the photo to the twilight, whispering something no one else could hear, and Buckshot leaned his head into his chest, as if he too remembered a girl named Emily. The old man took a long sip of water from the paper cup Jenny had offered. His hands trembled, not from age but from memory. Outside, the wind had picked up. A grocery bag floated past the window like some forgotten dream. Half-inflated and hollow. Jenny sat across from him, elbows on the table, her brow furrowed not in judgment, but in thought. You said ... Emily loved sunflowers? He smiled faintly. A smile so faint it looked like it might tear apart if held too long. She used to pick them in late June. We'd take drives, me, her mother, and Buckshot. Always the same field. She'd cry if the petals were brown. Said the flowers had to be smiling. Theo, still seated at a side table, had stopped coloring and now just listened. His little chin rested in his palm. He didn't understand everything, but he understood sadness when he saw it. The old man glanced down. I never brought her back from that last ride. I promised her a bouquet when I got home. She was 7 when the drunk driver hit their car. My wife died instantly. Emily was in a coma. She passed 3 days later. Jenny's lips parted. Her eyes shimmered. She couldn't say she understood, how could she? But her hand reached across the table instinctively. I left the army 2 weeks. Later, Buckshot. He wouldn't eat for days. He scratched at Emily's door until his paws bled. He paused. I sold everything, tried moving. Cities, towns, rooftops, every place held her voice. Her laugh in the sound of birds, her face in the eyes of children at playgrounds. There's nowhere to run when your ghost lives in everything. Jenny didn't look away. Not once. Buckshot, lying at his feet, thumped his tail just once, as if acknowledging the memory. Then came the next surprise. The bell above the bakery door jingled again. A man in a navy windbreaker entered, middle-aged, clean-shaven, with eyes that missed nothing. Excuse me, he said. I don't mean to interrupt, but is that Buckshot? The old man squinted. You know my dog? I'm Dr. Salinas. I used to volunteer at the Army K-9 Rehab Unit near Fort Eustis. That dog trained under Captain Rayner. The old man nodded slowly. I was Rayner. Dr. Salinas stepped forward, visibly moved. Sir, I remember you. You used to bring sunflower seeds in your vest pocket. You said it calmed the dogs down. Jenny gasped softly. I also remember what you did in Mosul, the doctor added. You saved 6 men under enemy fire. Buckshot was wounded too, right? The bakery had grown quiet again. Customers had stopped pretending not to eavesdrop. The old man said nothing. His eyes dropped to the floor. Jenny stood. This man was dragged out of here an hour ago like garbage. All because he looked dirty. Because he talked to a photo. And yet he saved lives, Dr. Salinas finished. And his dog too. Buckshot was listed as deceased. We thought he'd been lost. Theo rose from his chair and walked over. His little hand slid into the old man's. The old man looked down. At him. Theo simply asked, Did Emily like chocolate chip cookies too? The old man blinked hard, then smiled. She used to say they were sunshine you could eat. Outside, the clouds broke for the first time that afternoon. A shaft of light spilled through the bakery window. And for a moment, the old man's face lined, worn, battle-scarred looked peaceful. Scene 4. Awkward humor and ironic justice. It began with an apology sandwich and ended with a golden retriever peeing on a millionaire's loafers. The bakery was quiet, almost reverent, the kind of hush that follows a story so raw and human that no one dares speak first. That is, until the shrill ring of the front doorbell pierced the atmosphere. Jenny! Jenny, for the love of God, what's happening in here? Enter Mr. Bartholomew Whitmore, 3 landlord of the complex, owner of 4 properties in the city, and frequent flyer in local political donations. His pressed beige trench coat was still buttoned tight despite the sunshine outside, and his hair, the color of overcooked cauliflower, had been sculpted into place like he was preparing for a photo op. His eyes scanned the room with trained condescension, landing squarely on the grizzled old man sitting at the window booth with a half-eaten croissant, a worn backpack, and a loyal dog at his feet. He sneered. Why is the vagrant still here? I thought I made myself clear about loiterers. Jenny stepped out from behind the counter, her apron still dusted in flour, but her stance solid. That man has a name. His name is Raymond, and he's a war hero. Whitmore looked at her like she'd suggested crowning a raccoon king. I don't care if he's George Bloody Washington. He scoffed. This isn't a shelter, it's a family establishment. I have investors who eat here. He's making people uncomfortable. A rustle in the back of the bakery signaled the arrival of Dr. Salinas, still holding a mug of coffee that read, "They. Kind or be quiet." Uncomfortable, the doctor echoed slowly. Like PTSD? Like being left to rot after serving your country? Like grief so sharp it makes you forget your own name sometimes? Whitmore blinked, then tried to wave it off. Don't get all dramatic, Doc. I'm just saying people don't want to see that while they eat. Jenny's jaw tightened. See what exactly? Humanity? Just then, from behind the partition wall, a tiny voice piped up. Mommy said. A girl in pigtails. Why is the man crying? Did someone hurt his puppy? A hush fell again, sharp and full. No, sweetie, Jenny said softly, kneeling beside her. The man is just remembering someone he loved very much. Raymond hadn't moved. His eyes remained fixed on the photo in his lap, a snapshot of a girl no older than the one who'd just asked about Buckshot. Whitmore cleared his throat. He's scaring the customers. A woman near the window raised an eyebrow. I was more scared when your son tried to show me his crypto portfolio, Bart. Laughter bubbled, scattered but growing. A nervous ripple. Whitmore flushed. Listen, I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to run a business. And this man doesn't fit the image. You mean your image, muttered Salinas. Which, by the way, is flakier than Jenny's puff pastry. Someone snorted. Even Raymond cracked the smallest smile. But then the boy Theo stood up, shy, clear-eyed. He's my friend, he said simply. Whitmore turned. And who are you supposed to be, kid? I'm the one who sat with him, Theo replied. When no one else did, Whitmore blinked. Well, congratulations, but this isn't about friendship. This is about liability. Buckshot padded across the floor and sat neatly at Whitmore's feet, tail swishing with suspicion. His nose twitched. Keep that mutt away from me. Whitmore grumbled. Buckshot tilted his head, then lifted his leg. A thin stream of yellow marked Whitmore's imported shoes like a signature. The silence cracked wide open. Then Jenny laughed. And Theo. Then the woman with the crypto joke. Soon, everyone was laughing giddy, guilt-ridden laughter. The kind that breaks tension and bridges divides. Even Salinas had to lean against the counter. Whitmore stepped back, eyes bulging. You people think this is funny? Jenny wiped tears from her eyes. You spent 15 minutes dehumanizing a man who fought for your right to whine about liability. And now a dog peed on your $900 shoes. The universe is hilarious, Bart. Raymond, finally looking up, grinned. Guess he's just got good instincts. Buckshot always did hate bullies. Someone chimed in from the back. Whitmore huffed, turned on his heel, and strode toward the exit, his path made awkward by the squish of each wet step. As the door slammed shut behind him, little girl asked, Is that man going to be okay? Jenny chuckled. He'll be fine, sweetie. Maybe a little soggy, but fine. The bakery began to move again. Someone brought Raymond a new cup of coffee. Theo returned to his seat. Salinas patted Buckshot like he'd just cured cancer. And for a moment, the world inside the bakery felt different, not perfect, but lighter, kinder. The kind of world where maybe, just maybe, the line between us and them could be erased by a child's question or a dog's bladder. Inside the quaint bakery, the temperature was rising not from the ovens, but from the heat of scrutiny and judgment that had nearly turned the place sour. But just when tension threatened to boil over, fate decided to stir in something unexpected. Humor, irony, and the curious way the universe sometimes defends the downtrodden in style. The old man Raymond, though no one had asked his name yet, was still near the counter, clutching the bent photograph. Jenny, the barista with wary eyes and a protective stance, hovered nearby, arms crossed, lips pursed. Mr. Halberd, the manager, returned from a phone call in the back office, his face red with a mix of exasperation and discomfort. Securities. On the way, he announced to no one in particular, loud enough for Raymond to hear. Can't have people loitering around upsetting customers. A murmur of agreement rose from a few corners, but it was far from unanimous. Then, out of nowhere, a voice piped up. "Wait, this your dog?" Everyone turned. A teenager in a hoodie had pulled out his phone and was pointing at the screen. There, in a blurry image clearly taken from some old local news article, was a photo of Buckshot, same eyes, same vest, same presence. The headline read, "K9 Hero Saves Unit in Iraq. Local man and his dog return home after final tour." Raymond didn't say a word. He just nodded slowly. A stunned silence rippled through the bakery. Jenny blinked. "You were in the service?" He finally spoke again, voice steady now. "3 tours. Buckshot's the reason I'm here to tell the story. That and a little girl named Emily." Before anyone could process that, the door opened with a jingle. In stepped a tall, confident woman in a crisp navy blue suit. Her eyes scanned the room quickly, zeroing in on Raymond. "Dad?" Gasps, mouths dropped open. Jenny dropped the cloth she was holding. Even Mr. Halberd took a reflexive step back. The woman strode forward, her heels echoing on the tile. She knelt beside Raymond. "What the hell are you doing here?" she asked, her voice somewhere between worry and rebuke. I was just looking. For the photo. The one of Emily. I thought I left it here last week when I came in to warm up." She glanced at the photo in his hand, then stood. Turning to the rest of the shop, she straightened her blazer and said, "I'm Assistant District Attorney Charlotte Maddox. This is my father." If the bakery had grown quiet before, now it was absolutely still. Someone let out a disbelieving chuckle. A man by the window muttered, "Well, I'll be damned." Raymond gave her a look, one part embarrassment, one part pride. Didn't mean to make a scene, just needed to see her face again. Charlotte looked around, her eyes icy and commanding. Who asked him to leave? Jenny, who now looked like she wanted to disappear into her apron, mumbled, "We didn't know." He looked, he was on the floor and like he didn't belong. Charlotte finished for her, her voice clipped. "I get it." Raymond touched her hand gently. "Charlie, let it go." But it wouldn't be let go. Not by the universe, because just then, little Theo spoke up again. He had climbed onto a stool and was looking squarely at the adults. "Why does everyone get so mean when someone looks sad?" Silence. He wasn't done. He just wanted a picture. "If I had a picture of my sister and I lost it, I'd cry too. But Mommy says I have to be quiet about feelings." Jenny covered her mouth. Raymond turned, slowly, and looked at Theo with soft, weathered eyes. "What's your sister's name?" "Ellie," Theo said proudly. "She's 2. She likes cookies." "Then you're lucky," Raymond said. "You've still got time to make lots of pictures with her." A few people in the bakery wiped their eyes. Someone near the door whispered, "This is breaking my heart." And then, just when the mood was on the edge of tender, the door burst open again. It was security. A young guy, all muscles and buzzcut, stepped in looking for action. "Where's the problem?" Charlotte turned slowly. "No problem. Just a bakery full of people learning something important." Security looked confused. "I got a call, something about a homeless man refusing to leave." Raymond chuckled for the first time all day. "Tell him I've been promoted." Buzzcut blinked. "To what?" Charlotte answered without missing a beat. "Father of the assistant district attorney, apparently." Laughter, real and relieved, filled the bakery. Even Jenny smiled through the sting of her embarrassment. Raymond eased into a chair as someone brought him a cup of tea on the house this time. Buckshot lay down at his feet, finally relaxed, and outside the window, the world went on. But inside that small shop, something had changed. A wall had cracked. A truth had been revealed. And an old man in a ragged coat, once dismissed, once unwelcome, had become for a moment the heart of the room. He didn't say much when the boy handed him the sandwich. Not because he was rude, or proud, or even shy. It was because in that moment, with the sun just beginning to dip behind the high-rises and the concrete cooling beneath him, Charles Whitaker didn't trust his voice to come out steady. So he just nodded, a small slow dip of the head, and watched the boy jog back across the street, disappearing into the blur of commuters and neon signs flickering to life. The sandwich was warm. He could feel it through the wax paper, radiating gently against his fingers like something alive. He hadn't eaten since the evening before, and even then, it was half a granola bar someone had tossed near the trash. He opened the package slowly, almost reverently, as if unwrapping a memory. And in a way, he was. He sat back down in his usual spot near the subway vent, where the heat rose in unreliable bursts. Max, his old dog, lifted his head but didn't get up. Just watched him with those tired, loyal eyes. "Smells like cheese, buddy," Charles muttered. "You remember cheese?" Max gave a soft, almost amused grunt. Charles took a bite, and it was instant. He was back in a kitchen that no longer existed, cracked linoleum, the scent of something burning just slightly, and laughter. High-pitched, joyful laughter. His daughter, Emily. She used to beg for grilled cheese every Saturday, he whispered. The sandwich halfway to his mouth again. Didn't matter what else we had. Pancakes, waffles, No, she wanted grilled cheese. He chewed slowly, letting the warmth spread. Not just through his stomach, but through his ribs, his chest, his heart. It had been so long since he allowed himself to feel something other than cold, or pain, or bitterness. The kind of long that made feelings seem like ghosts, things he once knew, now blurry and insubstantial. He pulled the photograph from his coat. It lived in a Ziploc bag, kept close to his chest in the inner lining, right over his heart. He unfolded it, the corners worn and soft. A girl in a red dress, toothless grin. Her arms wrapped around a younger version of himself, one still clean-shaven and broad-shouldered in his dress uniform. A bronze star pinned to his chest. Pride in his eyes, and behind that pride, now he could see it, was hope. That picture was taken 3 days before he deployed to Afghanistan. The last time he saw Emily alive, he stared at the photo longer than he should have. The city moved around him like a river split by a stone, streams of people flowing to avoid his quiet grief, their eyes avoiding the edges of his reality. And in the middle of it all, he sat like a shipwreck, holding onto a single artifact from a sunken life. His fingers brushed over the ink where Emily had drawn a heart on his uniform jacket. She'd insisted on adding it with a pink Sharpie right before the picture. "So you don't forget how much I love you," she had said. He remembered her tiny voice, the way she stood on her tiptoes to reach his chest. "I never forgot, baby," he whispered. "I never could." The wind picked up, sending wrappers skittering down the sidewalk. Max gave a soft bark and shifted closer. Charles laid a hand on the dog's head, absently rubbing behind his ears, still staring at the photo. He remembered the knock on the door when he was halfway through his second deployment. A chaplain and a local police officer. He remembered the way their faces looked tight, pale, rehearsed. He remembered falling to his knees before they even spoke. A drunk driver. A red light. Emily and her mother on the way home from school. No. Survivors. That was the night everything broke. After that, Charles didn't ask to be reassigned. He begged for it, volunteered for every mission no one wanted. His commanding officer called it bravery. His squad called it guts. But he knew better. It was punishment. it was escape. And deep down, it was surrender. When the army finally discharged him honorably with medals and applause, he came home to nothing. No house, no family, just echoes. And grief like a second skin. The VA tried at first. Paperwork, appointments, caseworkers with tired eyes. But the system was slower than trauma. And the streets were always faster. So he ended up here. Year after year, invisible. Until today. Until that sandwich, that child he couldn't have been more than 11 or 12, didn't just give him food. He gave him something deeper. The reminder that he was still seen. Still human. And somehow that reminder cracked something open. Something Charles had buried beneath years of sorrow and silence. "I miss you so bad." He said, his voice raw. He folded the photo carefully, returned it to its plastic envelope, and placed it back over his heart. Then he leaned back against the brick wall and let the tears come. They weren't loud. They didn't draw attention. They just were. And for the first time in years, Charles let them stay. He didn't know what tomorrow held. He didn't know if the boy would come back. But tonight, for this one moment, he felt her presence. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start again. The next morning arrived with the kind of silence only a city can understand. The muffled hum of early deliveries. The soft hiss of buses. The footsteps of workers with coffee and purpose. But on that familiar corner, something had shifted. People began to slow down near that diner, not because they were hungry, but because something in the air felt different. The air held the memory of something honest. A small laminated photo of a girl had been taped to the street lamp, with a note scribbled in pen beneath it. Her name was Melody. She was my everything. It was Marvin who'd done it before he left for the night, the quiet cook who barely said more than a few words to anyone. No one asked him to do it. He just had to. Because the image of that old man clutching the photo, his hands shaking not from age, but from restraint, stayed with Marvin through the night like the scent of grease and sorrow. Inside the diner, things weren't the same either. Denise didn't blast her usual early morning jazz playlist. Instead, she kept the radio low, listening not for traffic reports, but for any news about the man they all now regretted brushing aside. Jerome hadn't shown up that morning. No dog on the corner, no crumpled coat. No soft thank yous as people passed him by. For the first time, the corner felt less watched, less protected, as if something sacred had gone missing. And in the hearts of those who remembered the day before, the shouts, the accusations, the silence that followed guilt had begun to bloom like frost in spring. Denise placed a single black coffee and a warm biscuit on the farthest table by the window. No one asked who it was for. She just did it. Because rituals matter, especially when words fall short. Later that morning, something happened that no one expected. A school group passed by on their way to the history museum, and a little girl with 2 afro puffs stopped and stared at the taped photo. "Who's that, miss?" she asked. The chaperone bent down. "Someone's daughter," she said softly. The girl turned to her friends. "We should say a prayer for her daddy too." So they did, right there on the sidewalk in their small circle of backpacks and giggles and mismatched mittens. They bowed their heads not because someone told them to, but because empathy, when unblocked, flows faster in children. Inside, Denise cried quietly behind the coffee machine. Even Harold, the manager, didn't yell that day. No one knew where Jerome had gone, but they knew they wanted him back, not because he made them feel noble by giving, but because he made them remember what it meant to be human. That afternoon, the sky opened up with a soft drizzle. Not a downpour, just the kind of rain that taps gently on windows and reminds you to think a little deeper. People walked slower, many with their heads slightly bowed, not just against the weather, but as if in quiet remembrance. A man in a dark hoodie stopped by the lamppost. He stood still for a long while, staring at the photo of the girl. Then he placed something small at its base, a worn-out stuffed rabbit, its ears chewed, its fur faded from love and time. No one asked questions. No one needed to. The corner wasn't just a place anymore. It had become a space between what had happened and what could be done better. And sometimes that was enough to begin again, across the city. In a different courthouse miles away, the sound of heavy boots echoed down a hallway. A different kind of reckoning was unfolding. One that involved sealed files, missing tapes, and a name buried too long in silence. Because the truth doesn't stay buried forever. And sometimes, the ones you tried to forget come back with a voice stronger than ever. The courthouse stood like a relic from a sterner time, its grand marble columns etched with the wear of decades, its heavy wooden doors opening each morning to a flood of fates decided and dismissed. But today, there was something different about the air. The people lining the steps weren't just lawyers and defendants. They were citizens murmuring with uncertainty, whispering about the old man in the worn military jacket, the man who had once been invisible. Inside, the courtroom buzzed not with routine, but with tension. Journalists leaned into their notebooks. A child clutched their father's hand, eyes wide. A television camera light blinked red. Frank stood at the defendant's table. Not wearing anything new, he didn't own anything new but freshly cleaned. His beard was trimmed, his boots polished. He didn't look like a homeless man anymore. He looked like a veteran. Like someone who had been through fire and crawled back out with stories etched into his bones. His court-appointed lawyer, a young woman named Eliza Mendez, stood beside him. She had met him only 2 days before, but had listened to every word he'd said as if he were testifying to something deeper than law, something sacred. Her eyes burned with conviction. The judge entered stern-faced, gray-haired, and visibly skeptical. Judge Carroll was known for her efficiency and her intolerance of emotional theater. She banged the gavel once. This court is now in session. The prosecutor stood, a man named Eric Tallman, clean-cut and confident, the kind of man who always assumed guilt from the appearance of poverty. Your Honor, he began, the facts of the case are straightforward. The defendant, Frank Darrow, refused a lawful order to vacate private property, resisted removal, and assaulted a security officer in the process. Frank didn't flinch. His eyes remained fixed on the floor. But in the audience, a stir moved. Through the crowd, those who had seen the video, who had witnessed how it had all begun, with a photograph in the dirt, a man asking for a moment of dignity. Eliza rose. Your Honor, we will show that Mr. Darrow's presence posed no threat, that he was neither violent nor trespassing with ill intent, and more importantly, that he was treated with inhumanity, not justice. The judge nodded curtly. Proceed. What followed wasn't so much a trial as a reckoning. Witness after witness was called, some testifying for the prosecution, painting Frank as unhinged, unpredictable. A store clerk claimed he'd seen Frank muttering to himself outside for hours. A guard said he'd feared for his safety. But their voices rang hollow. Then came those who knew the man. Mrs. Klein, the woman who had once given Frank leftover bread, stood and said, he never asked for anything but time. He talked to his dog like it was his last family. And that day, he wasn't bothering anyone. He was kneeling in the dirt holding a picture. That's all. A teenage boy, Jamal, who had once been stopped by police for loitering, told the court how Frank had given him advice that changed his life. He told me I mattered, that I should read, write, and not let them label me, that I had a fire in me. That old man, he saved me. Then Eliza played the security footage. The grainy black and white video captured it all: the shoving, the indifference, the moment Frank reached into his pocket not for a weapon, but for a worn-out photo of a girl in a sun hat. Gasps rose. Judge Carroll blinked. For the first time that morning, her hands trembled slightly. We would like to call Frank Darrow to the stand. Frank approached slowly. He didn't look like someone preparing for defense. He looked like a man preparing to remember. "State your name for the record." "Franklin Joseph Darrow." "Mr. Darrow, why were you on the steps of the McKinley Plaza that day?" He inhaled deeply. "Because that's where my daughter used to work, at the flower shop on the corner. She died 3 years ago. Drunk driver. I go there every year on her birthday. Sit by the bench. I bring her picture. I talk to her." Eliza's voice was soft. "And were you being aggressive?" "No, ma'am. I was kneeling, talking to a ghost." "Did you attack anyone?" He looked toward the jury. "Only thing I ever attacked was an enemy soldier in 91. And even then, I never felt right about it." The courtroom sat in silence. "And the photo?" Frank reached into his pocket, unfolded the creased image. "This is her, Rachel. She was 26. Had a laugh that could stop time." Eric Tallman rose for cross-examination but faltered. His prepared questions about loitering, mental instability sounded cruel in the weight of the moment. "Mr. Darrow," he asked, "why didn't you just leave when you were asked?" "Because the dead don't move on, Mr. Tallman, and sometimes neither do the living." Gasps, sniffles. By the time court recessed for lunch, the energy had shifted. Reporters no longer saw a curiosity, they saw a cause. Young law students scribbled notes with tears on their cheeks. Even Judge Carroll seemed quieter when she banged her gavel to dismiss. Outside the courthouse, protesters had gathered not against Frank, but against the way he'd been treated. Signs read, "Honor veterans, not humiliate them. Dignity isn't a crime. We are one bad day away from the street." Frank sat on the steps where it all began, cradling his dog and his photo, surrounded not by fear but by strangers who called him neighbor. Eliza sat beside him. "Tomorrow we'll hear closing arguments. Are you ready?" Frank chuckled. "I've been ready since the first time someone looked at me like I didn't belong. That was a long time ago." The courtroom was silent when the jury filed back in. 12 strangers who had, for 3 days, listened to the pieces of a man's life that were never meant to be public. They avoided looking at Frank as they took their seats. Not out of judgment, but out of reverence, perhaps. The weight of their decision was written on their faces. Frank sat upright, but still. Eliza glanced at him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Outside, the courthouse lawn was flooded with people. Some carried signs, some held candles. All had come not because they had to, but because they felt something had happened here that needed to be witnessed. The foreman stood, cleared his throat. "In the case of the state of California versus Franklin Joseph Darrow on the charges of trespassing and assault, we find the defendant not guilty." A beat of silence, then applause. A single clap, then a second. Then the room erupted. Not the kind of chaotic celebration reserved for sports games or elections, but a swelling emotional affirmation, relief, justice, vindication. Judge Carroll raised her gavel to quiet them, but did not strike it. Instead, she looked down at Frank. "Mr. Darrow," she said slowly, "this court owes you something more than a verdict. It owes you an apology. And though I cannot speak for the system, I can speak for myself. I failed to see you. I won't make that mistake again." Frank nodded, swallowing something too large to speak. Afterward, the courtroom emptied slowly. People lingered to shake his hand, to thank him, to say things like, "You reminded me of my father," or "I used to walk past you and feel nothing. I'm sorry." But Frank's eyes were somewhere else, distant, fixed on a place far away from the polished benches and fluorescent lights. That night, he walked alone to the old plaza. The flower shop was gone now, replaced by a mobile phone retailer with too many screens and not enough soul. But the bench was still there. And he sat. He pulled out the picture. Rachel's photo, worn to a blur at the edges, still captured the way her smile tilted slightly, higher on the left side. Like she always knew something funny before you did. The street was quieter than usual. Even the city seemed to pause. Frank spoke. You would have been 30 now, kiddo. Probably still wearing those ridiculous sunflower earrings. Still yelling at me to shave my beard. He chuckled to himself, tears catching the corners of his eyes. You remember that birthday we went to the beach, and I forgot the cake in the trunk? You cried for 20 minutes, told me I ruined everything. Then we sat on the hood of the truck and ate melted chocolate frosting with our fingers. Best damn cake I ever had. He leaned back, the weight of memory pressing both gentle and brutal. You told me you wanted to be a botanist. Said you'd invent a flower that bloomed only when people were kind. Said it'd be rare as hell. I think you were right. A soft breeze stirred the leaves. Frank's hand gripped the photograph like it was a lifeline. I wish I had been better. Wish I hadn't shut down when your mother died. You took care of me more than I did you. And when you left, I thought maybe I deserved it. To be alone. To vanish. But maybe not. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny wrapped object, a necklace, tangled and rusted. Rachel's. A daisy charm. He had carried it every day since the accident. He tied it gently to the bench's armrest. I know you're not here, not really. But I need to believe you're somewhere watching. And I need you to know, they saw me today, not all of me. But enough. A silence followed, thick and golden. Then a child's voice broke it. Mister, is that your daughter? Frank turned. A little girl stood beside her mother, pointing at the painting. Photo. Her hair was braided in twin lines, and her eyes held no judgment. Just curiosity. Frank nodded. Yes, she was. The girl smiled. She's pretty. Frank felt something shift in his chest. Not pain, not loss. Something else. Yeah, he whispered. She really was. Back in his small shelter, no longer on the street, but offered by a veterans outreach program, Frank sat at a desk for the first time in years. Eliza had given him a notebook. Write it down, she'd said. For her, for you, for someone who needed someday. He opened the first page. Dear Rachel, you used to ask me why I never kept a journal. I said war had already written too many stories in me, but maybe you were right. Maybe the stories aren't meant to be buried. Maybe they're meant to be shared so someone else knows they're not alone. His pen scratched forward. Page after page. And for the first time in years, Frank Darrow didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. He felt like a father again. The verdict had been delivered. The courtroom, which once pulsed with judgment and tension, now carried the echoes of relief. As the gavel struck its final blow and the words, "Not guilty," rippled through the chamber, a subtle shift occurred, not just in Frank's world, but in the hearts of everyone who had watched this trial unfold. Outside, the sky was soft with overcast light, as if the heavens themselves were exhaling. Frank stood on the courthouse steps, not as a symbol, not as a headline, but as a man who had been seen, heard, and for once, understood. He hadn't expected the tears. Not from strangers, not from journalists. But they came streaming silently down the faces of those who had found something of themselves in his defiance, in his pain, in his quiet resilience. Eliza stood beside him, her young face visibly worn, yet uplifted. She had fought not just for his freedom, but for something deeper, a restoration of dignity. They asked if you want to give a statement. She said softly. Frank looked at the microphones, the blinking red lights, the sea of lenses waiting to capture the next chapter of the story they'd only just discovered. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he stepped forward. I'm not a hero, he began. I'm not even the best man I know. I've been angry, I've made mistakes. But I loved a little girl who wore sun hats and smelled like daisies. And when she died, I didn't know how to live anymore. The crowd quieted, breath held. I don't want your pity, Frank said, his voice steady. I want you to look around. Look for the next me. The man sitting alone with his back to a bench. The woman counting change for a coffee she won't buy. Don't wait for someone to be arrested before you care about where they sleep. No applause followed. Only silence, respectful, weighty, sacred. The days that followed were strange and dreamlike. Frank had never been inside a television studio. But suddenly he was in several. He didn't particularly like the lights or the makeup they tried to put on him. He didn't like how they edited out the pauses, the awkward silences where he said the most with his eyes. Still, stories bloomed. News anchors spoke of systemic injustice. Cities launched new veteran outreach initiatives. A local university offered him a small monthly stipend to speak to classes on resilience and service. He laughed at the title they gave him, Community Witness in Residence. The dog, his only remaining family, was no longer just the mutt. Children called her Daisy now, after the daughter he never stopped mourning. She wore a small ribbon on her collar, donated by a little girl who'd written, "To Mr. Frank's dog, you matter too." One day, he returned to McKinley Plaza. This time, he was invited. The flower shop Rachel used to work at, now owned by a kind woman named Carla, had made a small memorial for Rachel. There was a photo of her in the window, the same one Frank carried in his pocket all those years. Underneath, a sign read, "In memory of Rachel Darrow, she bloomed here." Frank sat on the bench that afternoon, just like he always had. Only this time, no one told him to move. People passed by and nodded. A few sat with him. One brought a coffee. Another offered a book of poetry. He thought about the years he had spent invisible, how quickly the world had been willing to forget someone, just because they no longer fit the image of productivity. And he thought about Rachel. She would have been 30 now, maybe married, maybe with a daughter of her own. He imagined her laughter filling some kitchen somewhere, her sun hat tossed on a coat rack, her hands digging into a bag of soil to repot something bright and wild. "You'd love the way people look at me now, kid," he whispered to the photo in his hand. "But I know you'd tell me not to get cocky." He found a small apartment through a program set up after his trial. It wasn't much, just one room and a kitchenette, but it had hot water and a window that faced the sunrise. He bought a chair from a thrift store and placed it by the window. Each morning, he sat there with Daisy, watching the day begin. He started writing letters. Not emails, letters. To his old army buddies. To a mother in Kansas who had written to him after the trial. To Jamal, the teen who had testified for him. He sent him a copy of his favorite book, The Things They Carried, and wrote in the margins, "Carry only what helps you stand tall." A local high school invited him to speak. He didn't prepare anything formal. He stood in front of kids who barely looked up from their phones and told them the story of a girl who made him want to live better. By the end, several phones were down, several heads bowed. And one night months later, Frank was walking home when he passed a man curled up on cardboard under an awning. The man looked up, eyes wary, expecting to be ignored. Frank stopped, reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded photo, not of Rachel, but of Daisy, tail wagging, tongue out. He handed it to the man. "She'll sit with you until morning if you need. Just bring her back. She likes bacon." The man blinked, then nodded. Frank walked on, hands in his jacket, the street lamp casting long shadows behind him. He was no longer just a name on a docket. No longer a story of injustice. He was living proof that sometimes, even at the edge of despair, there's a way back. Not a perfect way, but a beginning. Months passed. The courthouse faded from the headlines. The signs were taken down, and the camera crews moved on to louder stories. But Frank Darrow remained no longer a ghost in plain sight, but a man remembered. He still visited that bench every year, still spoke to the photo of Rachel. But now, there was no fear of being pushed aside. No need to defend the act of loving someone who was gone. Frank volunteered part-time at the local shelter, teaching younger vets how to fix things, appliances, wiring, even broken hearts, with small acts of dignity. Eliza stopped by from time to time, and so did Jamal, who had just gotten accepted into a college pre-law program. The city changed in small ways. One bench downtown now bore a plaque, "To those we forgot, but who never forgot us." It wasn't much, but it was more than silence. And as for Frank, on quiet mornings, he would sip lukewarm coffee from a chipped mug, his dog resting at his feet, and watch the street come alive. Every so often, someone would recognize him, a nod, a smile. Once or twice, a whispered, "Thank you." He never asked what for. He knew. If Frank's story moved you even a little, if it reminded you of someone you've seen, someone you've passed, someone you've maybe forgotten, consider sharing this video. Consider subscribing. Not for numbers, but because stories like this matter. And because, sometimes, the quietest lives leave the loudest echoes. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more true stories that deserve to be heard.